Okay, let's start as usual with Hahayom Yom for the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul, 30 Menachem Av. Instructions. Begin saying LeDavid Hashem Oiri. We add this starting now, every day. The custom in the Rebbe's home on this first day of 2 days of Rosh Chodesh is to practice sounding the shofar during the day, and on the second day of Rosh Chodesh, begin sounding the shofar after davening. A teaching from the Middle Rebbe. The Middle Rebbe at first used to say brief Maimorim. This was also true of the Alter Rebbe. There was an evolution from very small things and larger until there were full Maimorim, full discourses. So the Middle Rebbe, his son, also used to do that, starting with brief discourses. For example, the Maimer Zecher Rav Tuvecha, which is the beginning of a pasuk. Zecher Rav Tuvecha Yobihu. Remember the goodness that has been uttered, or speak the goodness of Hashem, and Tzidkotzecha Yiranenu, and sing His righteousness, His tzedakah, which will bring us back in a second, in a few minutes, to the Tanya, where we're speaking about our tzedakah and His tzedakah. On the theme of Elul, which is the arousal from below affects an arousal from above. That what we do down here affects the great effusions from above. So it's related to this mimer of the Middle Rebbe, and this mimer is published in the Siddur, not in the Siddur that most of us use. There are a few versions of the Siddur. One of the Siddur is called Siddur im Hadach, the Siddur with Hasidus. It's the Alter Rebbe's, all Maimorim in the Middle Rebbe's and the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimorim that are placed in the Siddur for contemplation and for learning, and contemplation and meditation during davening. So this short mimer is in the Siddur with Divrei Elokim Chaim, which has words of Hasidus published with it. And it was said in 6 sequential sections, this short mimer and then the longer mimer, at somewhat greater length than in the printed version. Okay. Having said that, let's sing the praises of Hashem's tzedakah and the praises of our tzedakah. Lesson in Tanya, volume 4, in the small version. 30 of begins in the middle of page 160. Yeah, therefore, my beloved ones. We're in the middle of a pastoral letter, that's what they call them, a letter that the Alter Rebbe is speaking to his Hasidim, which is us, right? And he began this letter a few days ago. We started it, to my beloved ones, to the ones whom I love, who are like my very self. And he pleads with us, that the everyday affairs that we do in order to make a living are not primarily about us, but should be, when we do them, no matter what we're doing, think of the way that what we're doing to make a living and the encounters that we have in everyday life should be from the perspective of what can I do from another, for another. And that begins at home, right? As we say in English, tzedakah begins at home, with giving to your wife, family, or your husband, and those who are near and dear to you, and extends so that the entire, really avoida, the entire work with one's hands and in the world is for the sake of bringing down God's righteousness, His tzedakah, His charity, which we explain why is it called charity. The creation itself is an act of charity of Hashem because He puts Himself aside in order to bring about the creation. So similarly, Midah Keneged Midah, we are created in His image. Our work as humans is also and meant to be in that modality, the modality of constantly doing for others. Of course, the more you do for others, the more peaceful and full you are yourself, but you're not full of yourself. You're full of the Kedusha, the holiness that surrounds giving yourself over to the benefit of other people. And so we'll begin on page Kuf Yud Dalet, nearly in the middle of the page. The line begins Ubanav Shal Adam, and it's over on the left. Al Kain, it's an abbreviation, Ayin Chav. Therefore, having said what I just said, just summarizing what the Alter Rebbe has said in the last few days, Al Kain, therefore, therefore, my beloved ones, my brothers, my sisters, Simu no levavet, place the following upon your hearts. In regard to those things which I have said and which I have just summarized shortly, but he had said in a very short way. And he says in parentheses, and if God gives us the opportunity, we will speak panim el panim. We will speak face to face, in face-to-face yechidus. Adarbe bomberucha. I will speak with you at length, either in yechidus or in his or assembly of the people together to say Nefabringim, to say Mamorim. So what is it that one should keep in mind, keep in heart? Kol ikar avodas Hashem. How it is that the root of the entire service of ourselves that we've been created for in our service of God is in these times, the times that he's speaking in the 1700s, right? Important to note, I think, because we say, well, what's got the 1700s got to do with us? Well, it has a huge amount to do with us, because in Torah, the Torah perspective on time is that there are 6,000 years culminating at the end of the 6,000 year in Bias HaMashiach. And those 6,000 years, right, we're in the 5 sevens, right toward the end of the 6,000 millennia, divided in 3 big groups. The first group is from creation to Avraham, and that's called Shnei Alofim Toihu V'Boihu, the 2,000 years of confusion. As you see, the world was quite a wild world, culminating in the flood, which had to eradicate all that wildness, that Toihu V'Boihu, that wildness. And out of that chaos comes, well, Noah. Noah begins to bring order to the world, but the main order is brought to the world by a student in the academy of Noah. It was set up, actually, the academy of Shem Be'er. Noah's son and his grandson set up a Torah academy in which Avram Avinu learned. And Avram Avinu begins the Shnei Alofim Torah, the 2,000 years of Torah. So first you have 2,000 years of confusion, giving forth out of that confusion, which is a metaphor in itself for our states of confusion and anxiety need to be resolved, and from that resolution comes a higher power. After resolution of discomfort comes Torah, 2,000 years of Torah, which culminates in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, the sages, whose main avoda was learning and bringing forth the proper understanding of the Torah. So as he said, but then comes the next and final 2,000 years, which is called Ikvasa de Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach, the pathway to Mashiach. And that's what he mentions here. So let's say this again. A person should know that the main avoda, the main service of Hashem in these 2,000 years, which are culminating soon, is called Ikar Avodas Hashem Be'itim Halolo, that the main work, avodah, the service of Hashem in these worlds, the Ikvasa Mashiach, that's why I talked in this era called the heels of Mashiach, or the pathway or walking of Mashiach, who avodas tzedakah, is the service of tzedakah. As is written, Razal, or sages have said, Ein Yisrael negolin ele b'tzedakah. The Jewish people are only redeemed through the merit of their tzedakah, not through the merit of learning. And our sages who did say that learning Torah is weighed equally with Gemilas Hasadim, with acts of kindness, he said that was not said only in their days, as I said, the time of the explication of the Mishnah, the Gemara, and ultimately the Meforshim that lead to the Shulchan Aruch. Well, that was only the time of the Chachamim Gedolim. Shetalmid Torah hoya ikra avoda etzlom. In those days, the main avoda was clarifying and making clear and understanding the Torah, and that was the main avoda then, the main service then. And that's why, in that time, at the time of particularly culminating the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Rishonim and then the Acharonim, the first explainers and then the later explainers of the Torah, they were great, wise people. Tanoim the Amaroyim, which are the Tanoim who explicated the Mishnah, and the Amaroyim who followed them. Masha Ein, which is not the case in this latter 2,000 years, which is called the Ikvus Mashiach, the heels of Moshiach. Shenaflu Sukkah's David, where the Sukkah of David has fallen. The Sukkah of David, we've learned that the Sukkah is the all-encompassing light. And when you go into a Sukkah, it completely surrounds you. And the destruction of the temple and a house is also a manifestation of Soida because you live inside it and it encompasses you. And the house collapsed. The house, two houses collapsed, two temples collapsed. So that's expressed by the metaphor, Sukkahs David HaNefeles, the fallen Sukkah of David HaMelech. Malchus, which we've learned earlier, is the source of all Hashpah, all the flow into the world is the sphere of Malchus. That sphere of Malchus has fallen. Sukkahs David HaNefeles, and it's come down to Bechinas Raglayim V'Akvayim, has fallen down to the feet and to the heels. And that's where the expression comes from, Ikvisa de Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach. In other words, from the fallen state, we are living through and doing an avoida 2,000 years to bring that fallen state of the heels, and which is down in the heels and the foot, up and raise up the temple again, which culminates, of course, in rebuilding or the drawing down of the third temple, the Bias HaMashiach Tzidkenu, with the coming of Mashiach, our righteous one, in Heder Yemenu Mamish, absolutely soon, now. Shehi B'chinas Asiyah, and that's the doing. The doing 2,000 years, culminating in Bias HaMashiach, is the avodah of tzedakah, which, as we defined earlier and we learned earlier, is going out of ourselves for the sake of others. Ein derech l'davke boy. So in these 2,000 years, he says, Ein derech l'davke boy. There's no other path to cling to the Shekhinah, to the fallen Shekhinah, the emes and truth, and to transform darkness into light, the fallen state of Malchus, the fallen state of the Shekhinah. So we have to do something also, which is the act of tzedakah. As is known to all those who study and who are aware in their mind of what's this whole layout of history, so to speak. When we speak about God doing something, when God does something, what do we say? God is doing something. What is he doing? He's creating. He's creating it from the time that rose up in his mind to create. He continues creating. He keeps putting himself aside for the sake of the creation. That's what he does. And he draws down the flow of godliness lower and lower into this lower world ultimately. The Mandalesle, which is a world which has nothing on its own. Really, all the worlds have nothing on their own. They owe everything to God breathing, speaking them into creation every second. And that's tzedakah. That's the ultimate tzedakah. His whole being is invested in the creation. And he's saying here, analogously, our whole being, our whole magmosai, our whole striving should be invested in the goodness that we can bring to the world, to other people, who have magmirim, who don't have anything at all. In other words, people who are lacking whatever they're lacking, whether it's physical tzedakah, emotional, psychological, spiritual, Torah, bring whatever you have. As the Rebbe always says, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph. Just do something that when you come upon any situation where there's a need to bring some kind of wholeness or improvement to it, this is our avoidance. And this is what will bring Moshiach. Kol hazeveyach es yitzray. This interesting word. Anyone who slaughters his yetzer hara, right? Slaughter the negative impulses, which the simple one that we talked about earlier is just I'm working for myself. I'm working to make a living so I can pay a mortgage, right? But why? Why? Because I want to give wholeness to my household. So there's a difference in attitude, whether you aggrandize money for your own sake or whether you're doing it for, yes, you, but so you can be available to give to others. So he says, Kol hazevech es yitzrei, everyone who slaughters his yetzer hara, bezeh, in this, meaning in tzedakah, really push yourself to this, upaseich yodai, and opens up one's hands, ulavove, and opens up one's heart, iskafia sitaracha, that's called subjugation of the negative, of the forces of negative. Selfishness is a hallmark of what we call the sitra achra, the other side, and selflessness is what we call the hallmark of kedusha, of holiness. So prevailing in the positive is transforming the negative, and transforming what we call darkness into light. Hashem Yisborach, which is the light of God, may He be blessed. Hashechen Elenu, which dwells within us, amongst us. The Bechinas Asiyah, through those actions which we do, the Ikvas of the Mashiach in this period called the heels of Mashiach, Yezacha Lirais, and through that we will merit to see ayin b'ayin, eye to eye, face to face, B'shuv Hashem Tzion, that Hashem and the revealed presence of Hashem will return to Zion, the place where the Beis HaMikdash will come down and be rebuilt. B'mheir of Yameinu Mamish, is speedily in our days, B'bias HaMashiach Tzidkenu. I just remember a little boy, when I first was learning this years ago, we had a little summer place up near Muncie, and the house next door to me, 2 houses down, was another fellow who was like me in the beginning, Baal Shuva at the time, and he was in a Litvisha yeshiva where they were studying, Torah. That's the whole. In the Litvisha approach is mainly most of the day is filled with Gemara, and we had a deal that I would sort of be the leader in our beginning Habarusa in Tanya and Chassidus, and he would be the leader in, because, it is an obligation of every Jewish man particularly, but people in general, to learn halacha. Everybody has to learn halacha. And so that was the arrangement. And it was this time of year. And when we came across this sentence that the Alter Rebbe said today, that the entire avoida of our time is not learning, but to give tzedakah, he closed the book. He said, I can't learn this because this is not the shita. This is not the point of view of my yeshiva. Fast forward for about 30 years later, we met again, and he had become a Hasidic guy, not Chabad, but he had opened himself up to this, and he just wanted to tell me that he finally saw the wisdom and the importance, the criticality of giving to others over simply learning. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else besides me?
So I don't know. I don't see it that way when I look at what the text is saying, because it says "Ein derech l'davka ba be'emes."
Yeah. Yeah.
That the Torah, when there was a time that Torah was like a very, very strong, in the time when you had Tanam and Amoraim. So their Torah was to reach a true dvekus in Hashem. And
Not
we
only
have,
but not only that. And more importantly, there was a true understanding of how to live the Torah.
yeah, I'm just, but like my thought on that is that there was an immersion when you in davening also. We say about that they spent an hour preparing for davening and then they prayed, and they're praying. When you describe Tanam and Amoraim, Rab Nechunya ben Hakanya, when he prayed, he was not here. They were afraid that he wouldn't come back.
Right.
So they had but to say that we do have Talmud Torah, but we don't reach dvekas through it. We don't become fully immersed in it.
No,
it's not.
No.
It's like if we want to have that kesher to Hashem, now we have that kesher through tzedakah, because that level, it's a lower generation.
Yeah, listen. There's no question that the tefillah of the Chachamim was at a different level than the tefillah and always is of the Haman Am, of the average person. But in terms of the hours spent, you know that many of the Talmidic Chachamim didn't take themselves away from learning except for Krishma, because that's the halacha. So in terms of, yes, intensity of prayer and their ability to makaven, to have intentionality at deeper levels, I mean, they knew a lot, and they were able to do that. But in terms of, if you ask them, what's the main thing in these times? The main thing in these times is to mevara hilchasa, is to clarify the halacha, so that the Jewish people will know what to do. That was the main avoida of the Tanoim and Amoraim. It just is, their quality of prayer, sure, can be deep and much deeper than ours because of their learnedness and their level of mind. But in terms of what the general quality or the general instruction for the generation is, and he's not saying tefillah, by the way. He's not saying that in contrast to the early days when they were mainly involved in Talmud, that now our main avoida is tefillah. He doesn't say that. It goes without saying that tefillah is anytime, but tefillah b'makom korbanos, right? When the temple was destroyed, tefillah was in place of that. But the central avoida, the central necessity, what God needed to be done in that 2,000-year cycle was to be learning. And the main thing that God needs to be done to prepare ourselves for the third base of Mikdash is tzedakah. And that's what he's saying. Ein derech l'davka ba be'emes u'l'hafka v'shekel l'nahara ki im b'bechinas asiya, doing, which is ma'aseh hatzedakah.
I wanted to comment, Avi, that I don't know if this relates exactly, but the Gem video for this week is about how the Rebbe, when he would listen to people that would come to him and speak to him about very, really, really, really painful situations, you know. And the Rebbe would listen with his whole heart and have so much empathy. And it was like tremendous, you know, the empathy that the Rebbe would have for people.
I mean, I watched the Gem video, and it's not only the tremendous empathy, the tears that he would cry. And as one of those little vignettes showed, the tears that he would cry, feeling, empathy is the right word, having tremendous, I mean, more than anybody else, I can imagine having empathy, listening to people and crying with them, and the amount of time he spent with that. I mean, just look at how much time in the Rebbe's day with yechidus and dollars. people going by him. But he wasn't sequestered in his office. If you look at the Rebbe's time spent, I mean, he learned. Not only did he learned a lot. And he learned all over the place. But if you to divide it all the time that he's, the 24 hours of the day, a far greater portion of the day was spent with people and putting himself aside, calling for bring-ins that would surprise for bring-ins, and having yehidus hours and hours and hours, right, from afternoon until 4 a.m, people going by him, telling him, and him being mashpia to them, and that's tzedakah, putting himself aside for others.
Yes.
I mean, are there other tzaddikim who do that? Yes, but that's the avoid of the time, and that's what I think that's a very good indication. Just if you look at the Rebbe's proportional amount of time learning versus involvement with others, you see that he was a model for this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And that's what up to us to do that. And that will bring Moshiach Zekenu ben Hebron in a mamish. What else can be said? Someone else? The hand up, maybe it's still up. Yeah, it's right. Okay. There is a hand up. I can't see who it is. Oh, yeah, Rosie, I think it's still. Anybody else? Good stuff. And we'll see you in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.